Hello everybody, it is Dingle here and welcome back to my channel. I hope you all are doing super duper well. If you guys watched my 2023 life update video, we got a little bit on the topic of body image and how that general topic kind of relates to my infertility and how I've viewed my relationship with my body as it relates to infertility. And I mentioned that I think I could go into a little bit more detail than that video allowed. And I did notice in the comments that some of you resonated with that part of my life update resolutions. Like we just talked about what I was thinking about for 2023. And right now I'm getting ready for my stream. So I thought, what better way than to casually sit down and talk with you guys? Because I've gotten to love this space, clearly. We talk about a lot of deep life stuff in this little space here. I'm not going to focus on every single product that I use in this makeup routine, but I'll leave them linked down below in case you're interested in what I use for my makeup currently. I think before I get into anything, obviously this video is going to be talking about body image, relationship with body image, and all of the things that come with that. I don't plan on censoring myself for this video because I'll be sharing my own personal experience, but if that is a topic that you do not want to listen to or you do not like talking about or hearing about, please click off this video if that topic is not going to serve you. Also subscribe if you're new. My husband and I are going on 3 years of infertility and we have a second embryo transfer coming up. So it's a very exciting time on this channel and we would love to have you along. Anywhoosie, I think it makes sense to start with the foundation, no pun intended, on like where my body image kind of originated from. So I'm a 90s baby, which means that I hit some prominent years in the early 2000s. I feel like that is all I have to say for us to understand what I am saying with that, but just in case, let's dive in. The it girls in the early 2000s, when I was approaching like 10 to 12 years old, were Lindsay Lohan and Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton. And if you know anything about those people or that time, they were praised, or they set an example of sorts for the cool body to be very thin. And it's not just those people. It was the Victoria's Secret models. It was every model that you saw in a store. It was the tabloids that would glorify these tiny thin bodies and villainize normal looking bodies. And those tabloids definitely still villainize anything normal looking, whether that's cellulite or rolls or anything besides like the perfect physique, you know? But those same magazines aren't making the same sales and they're not necessarily being supported like they were back then. Because I think with social media and just times changing and quite frankly people being sick and tired of their bodies not being a standard of beautiful, those things are no longer cool to report on anymore. But for example, I remember there was this magazine cover where Jessica Simpson was like playing somewhere, or sorry, she wasn't like a band, she was singing somewhere, and all of the tabloids were just on how much weight she gained. And I remember looking at that magazine cover thinking, oh my gosh, I hope I never get to that point, because it was as if that was the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to somebody, is gain weight. And I remember thinking, based on what the cool body type was back then, that she was just so out of control and it was so unhealthy and all this stuff. I look at that magazine cover now and I don't even bat an eye. It literally was such a normal body. But based on the times, it was just like the end of the world to gain any sort of weight, or God forbid, have like rolls sticking over your jeans. Like that was outrageous. The other really hurtful things that I would hear growing up, and this was like everyone, like it wasn't just family members, it was just like the thing to say, but we would be walking around in public and God forbid somebody that wasn't a stick figure was walking around in shorts or, you know, just a tight-fitting t-shirt. The number one thing I remember that someone would say would be, oh, she should not be wearing that. Why? why shouldn't she be wearing that? That is the most ridiculous thing. Now at 30 years old, looking back at that, you will never catch me dead saying something like that about somebody's body. You won't catch me talking about somebody's body ever, honestly. So with that foundation in mind, I remember when I stopped gymnastics. I did gymnastics for 8 years, and that sport is just very physically taxing. Like, we would do strength and conditioning for like 1 hour of our 4-hour practices during the week, and we were super young, so when our muscles and stuff were developing, like, that's how they would develop. And I remember it just so happened that when I stopped gymnastics, I also was in 8th grade, which also aligned with when I was starting puberty. And I kind of knew that just based on conversations that I would have with my mom and stuff. Like, it wasn't a shock that I was going through that, but because of the background and the truths that I held on to about what is a good body and what is a bad body, I remember when I stopped gymnastics and puberty started to set in, I was noticing that my hips were coming in. I remember this memory to my core. It is a core memory of mine. I remember standing in my family home in front of a full-length mirror that they had in like a study off of the living room, and just staring at my body one night, sobbing to myself, by myself, late at night, and just looking at my hips that were now not fitting the pajama bottoms that I had had since 10 years old. And I remember just being devastated and thinking that I am just getting out of control. I am letting myself go. How could I do this? I shouldn't have stopped gymnastics. Like, it was so ridiculously unhealthy, and that is the first time I remember being so incredibly insecure about how my body looked. And as depressing as this sounds, ever since hitting puberty and ever since my body started changing in those ways, I was never happy with it. I was never ever, no matter what, happy with how my body looked, and it was always a concern. I would always judge myself in pictures in high school. I would compare my body in my track uniform to every other girl's body in their track uniform during high school track, and how their thighs looked when they were standing straight up. Like, it was the most toxic behavior. Jack and I talk about it to this day, of just how we want to change how we talk about food, or how we talk about bodies, or don't talk about bodies to our own kids, just based on the things that we would hear growing up in both of our separate growing up stages. So fast forward, there would be times where I was happier with my body versus not, but I would say all in all, it was always a struggle to accept my body, even into college and even into early adulthood, especially when I hit my late 20s and now I'm 30 years old. Your body naturally changes. And I remember obviously noticing these changes in my body because I was constantly monitoring how my body would look during these times, and just being so confused, because before I could barely work out and maintain the body that I was like hoping to maintain, or like striving to maintain, you know? But now my metabolism was slowing down, and I'm sorry, but if we expect a 27 to 30-year-old to maintain the body they had at 18 to 21, do we hear ourselves? Do we hear ourselves? But then 27 to 28 years old, I literally can't keep track of our infertility timeline anymore. One, because 2020 was a blur in general, and I constantly like can't remember that year, but also it's depressing to think about how long we've been in this situation. But by the time we started our fertility treatments, I would say maybe what was that, 2021? Yes. 2021. I was getting nervous as we started those treatments, because the first thing that I noticed with the hormones that I would be taking, even if it was just the hormones that I would be taking for my IUI, I noticed the bloating and I noticed the water retention. Like, that's the first thing that I noticed, were the changes in my body with these hormones and these chemicals. So I was a little nervous at how that would affect my mentality during a time when I was already already disappointed in my body for completely different reasons, all related to infertility and having the feeling that my body was failing me as a woman. So there was just like a lot of complicated feelings going on. And again, if you relate to any of this, please comment down below. I would love to hear about your experience. But as the months went on, yes, I would notice the changes in my body, but I became so consumed with all of the small little victories, like how many follicles I was producing during IVF cycles, even if it wasn't a lot. Just any follicles that I could produce, or any eggs they could retrieve, or how many embryos we could get. Like, I was so focused and almost distracted by the little victories that my body was doing that I stopped focusing so much on how my body looked, because all I cared about was what it was doing for me or not doing for me. So that was complicated as well. But I just look back at these times and I think of everything that it went through and everything that it did for me, whether it was, again, producing the follicles and the embryos, but healing from procedures, one procedure after another procedure, needles after needles after needles, like all of these things it was enduring and pushing through and then coming on to the other side. I didn't realize that that's where my focus was shifting to at the time, but that is where my focus was shifting to. And when it came time for the end of 2022 and into 2023, and I was taking a step back and looking at my 2023 and what I either wanted to accomplish or focus on or work on, my body and body image always was a topic for me at the start of a new year. And in the past, it was all about changing my physical body. But this year was different. Going from 2022 to 2023, having been through everything that I have been through in 2022, that topic, when I reached it in my reflection, was just so different in such a positive way. Going into 2023, I no longer had a physical goal of what I wanted my body to look like, but I had switched that mentality into what I wanted my body to achieve and not what I wanted it to look like. And that was a huge turning point, and it was so recent too. I guess it wasn't recent because that change in mentality was shifting over the whole year of 2022, but the realization was new for me. And it was just so incredibly freeing to realize that that had happened. And now, just as I was slightly worried about my mentality when it came to my body going through fertility treatments, how I was kind of worried at the start of that, I do think forward to pregnancy, and I can't help but hope and worry slightly that my mentality won't be very strong bringing me through pregnancy. But on the other side of it, I have been wanting this for God knows how long. And just like how I was able to focus on its achievements and the things that it was able to do throughout 2022, I hope and I am focusing on when I reach pregnancy, that is going to be something that I want to be so freaking proud of my body for accomplishing, because that is something that I never thought during the really tough times that I would be able to do. And I can't freaking wait to prove my mind wrong with being able to show myself that yes, I can conceive and I can grow and nurture a baby inside me. So that is just the mentality and the mindset that I'm hanging on to. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't a little bit worried about keeping up that mentality through pregnancy, but I guess we'll just have to see. And with that, the makeup is done and we are stream ready. I'm streaming Hogwarts Legacy for the very first time today. I haven't personally played it, so I'm really freaking excited. Anyway, I digress. I wanted to leave you guys with two things that I wrote down that have helped me through all of last year in hopefully what is a turning point with this crazy complex relationship I have with my body. The first thing is, you would never think the things that you think about yourself for somebody else or a friend. Think for a second how freaking mean we can be to ourselves sometimes based on just our looks. We would never ever think those things about somebody we loved or a friend that we have. So why are we saying these things or thinking about these things to ourselves? We have to be our own best friends, okay? We can't talk about ourselves like this anymore. It's too toxic, okay? The next is I've never once left a social interaction and based my experience on how somebody looks. It's how they made me feel. I literally don't care if the stereotypical what society deems as beautiful. I don't care if there is the absolute gold standard of a body standing in front of me if they are an absolute asshole. I will never like them. I will never think of them in a positive light. I will never want to interact with them ever again. If you think back to your positive interactions with someone, is it based on how that person looked? No. We both know the answer. It's absolutely no. So why do we put so much pressure on ourselves? Why do we put so much emphasis on how we look when at the end of the day, that's not what matters when it comes to interactions with other human beings? So that is what I would like to leave you guys with today. Again, if you resonated with absolutely anything that I touched on or talked about today, leave a comment down below. But otherwise, if you're new and you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to do so down below because we upload videos here on Wednesdays and Sundays. Everybody, do not forget to give this video a big old thumbs up. All my socials are left down below and I will catch you in the next one, my friends. We'll see you later. Bye.